Welcome back, dreamer. It's good to see you here again, in this quiet place, where the world slows and stories float like mist through the trees. The fire is warm, the wind is soft, and tonight we step gently into a story made of stillness. This is your time now, a place just for you, to breathe, to soften, to let go. You've done enough for today. You've carried enough. Now you can set it all down. Here, there are no expectations, no deadlines, no right words, just firelight and breath. So take a moment now. Let your jaw soften. Let your shoulders fall. And let your eyes grow heavy. Breathe in slowly. And let it go. There's nowhere else to be. Tonight's story is called The Bellmaker's Apprentice, a quiet tale of patience, transformation, and the gentle art of listening. It follows a young boy sent to a mountain village where silence teaches more than words, and the rhythm of breath and bell become one. Inspired by the quiet wisdom of Taoist thought, this story invites you to let go of striving and rest in stillness. And if this space brings you calm, if these whispered stories help you rest, you can support the dream by gently tapping like or subscribing for more quiet nights ahead. It means more than you know, and it helps this little light stay lit. If you're new here, welcome to this small and quiet corner of the world, where stories are told slowly with care, and each tale is a soft invitation to rest. This channel is a place for gentle narration, folklore-inspired sleep stories, and calm bedtime journeys crafted with love. If this brought you any comfort, a moment of stillness, a breath of ease, a like or subscribe helps keep the fire going and the stories flowing. And if you're returning, thank you. It's good to share this quiet space with you again. Now, if you're ready, let your breath settle. Let your mind loosen its grip. There is no need to try. No need to follow every word. Just let the rhythm guide you, soft and slow. Let the story meet you where you are. There's nothing to fix here, nothing to change, only a quiet path and the sound of your own breathing. Let's begin.
So high in the mountains that the clouds do not pass above it, but drift softly below. The air there is quiet, thin and patient, and the wind carries only what is light enough to let go. Stone paths curl through the trees. Homes are built into the hillsides, with shutters that hum when the breeze is kind. At the farthest edge of this village, just beyond where the pine trees begin to whisper, stands a small wooden house. No sign, no doorbell, only the faint shimmer of old metal and the scent of cool iron. This is where the Bellmaker lives. The boy came just after the first autumn wind. His coat was too big, his bag was too full, and his eyes were heavy, not with sleep, but with needing to prove something. He had not asked to come. He had not heard of the Bellmaker, but his family believed he would learn discipline here. So they sent him to the mountains, to a man who shaped bells but taught no students. The Bellmaker opened the door. Without a word, he looked the boy over, not unkindly, but without curiosity. Then he stepped aside. No introduction, no instructions, just a nod and a silence that stretched like sky. stepped in it, the door closed behind him, and in that quiet, the story began. The days passed quietly. The boy swept the floor, gathered water from the spring, sorted pieces of scrap metal by shape, by sound, by feel, but no one told him why. The Bellmaker worked with slow, deliberate movements, hammering, filing, pausing, always pausing. He seemed to listen more than he shaped. Sometimes he would stand for several minutes without lifting a tool, just looking at a half-finished bellows, though waiting for it to speak first. The boy watched, waited, tried not to fidget, but the quiet made his chest feel tight. He wanted noise, instructions, praise. He wanted to be doing something that made sense. But the only sound was wind brushing the eaves and the soft tap of hammer to bronze. One evening, as the sky turned violet, the boy finally asked, "What are you waiting for?" The Bellmaker looked up slowly, then down again. He placed the bell he had been shaping on a soft cloth, then answered, "I wait until I stop needing to rush." That was all. And though the boy did not understand, something about the words felt true. so he said nothing more, and listened as the last light faded from the room. The next morning, the Bellmaker rose early. The boy followed, still bleary-eyed and quiet. The man walked past the usual workshop door and instead out into the woods. A narrow path, moss beneath their feet, the scent of pine and river stone in the air. Eventually, they reached a clearing. And there, hanging from a curved tree branch, was a bell, old, weather-worn, its bronze edges faded to a soft green. The Bellmaker nodded toward it, said nothing. The boy stepped forward, looked up at the bell, waited. And just as the morning wind stirred the tips of the trees, the bell rang only once, clear, low, and honest. It wasn't beautiful, but it was real. The Bellmaker smiled, and they walked home without a word. That afternoon, the boy returned to the workshop, alone. The Bellmaker was somewhere beyond the trees, but the tools had been left out, neatly arranged, as always. The boy stood at the workbench. His hands hovered above the metal scraps. Then, slowly, he chose one. It was small, dull around the edges, not the right size, really, not the right shape, but it felt honest. He cradled it in his palm, turned it once, twice, then set it down on the cloth. He didn't know what to make. He didn't know if he should. as he worked. To feel the grain, the weight, the quiet shifts beneath his fingers. He didn't rush, didn't speak. The wind outside moved through the chimes overhead. The sun bent gently through the open window, and for the first time, the silence didn't press in. It settled around him, like breath, like understanding. The Bellmaker did not mention the boy's work. He returned just before dusk, his hands carrying a bundle of firewood, his face unreadable. He glanced once at the small bell in progress, said nothing, and lit the hearth. The boy wasn't sure if he was disappointed, or proud, or simply watching. That night, the air grew colder. Rain touched the roof with soft fingers. The wind curled around the corners of the house like an old song too tired to be sung aloud. They sat by the fire in silence. The Bellmaker carved something from wood. The boy stared into the orange light, his mind unusually stilled. At last, he asked quietly, "How do you know when a bell is ready?" The Bellmaker didn't look up. "You don't," he said. "You just stop when it no longer asks to be changed." The boy turned that over in his thoughts, again and again, like a smooth stone in the hand, no longer asks to be changed, not finished, not perfect, just no longer reaching. Just no longer reaching. He looked over at the small bell on the table, and for the first time did not feel the need to touch it again. The morning came grey and gentle, with clouds resting low against the mountainside. The world felt quiet in a different way, not empty, but held. The boy rose before the Bellmaker. He dressed slowly, tucked the small, unfinished bell into the pocket of his coat, and stepped out into the cold. Mist curled at the edges of the path. The pine trees whispered with damp breath, and somewhere in the distance a single crow called once, then fell silent. He walked back to the clearing, the same place where the old bell had hung, but today the tree was bare. He looked around, then carefully unwrapped the bell and tied it with a piece of cord to a low-hanging branch. It turned gently in the breeze, not quite even, not perfectly shaped. But it waited. As he waited, then, as the wind moved softly through the clearing, a tone rose from the bell, thin, trembling, but unmistakably there. A sound not made, but allowed. The boy didn't smile, didn't cheer, didn't even move. He only stood still and let the sound reach through him. That evening, the boy returned late, his coat damp from mist, his step slow and quiet. The Bellmaker was seated by the fire again, carving a narrow piece of wood with hands that never seemed in a hurry. The boy said nothing at first. He simply sat and let the warmth find its way into his fingers. After a while, he took the bell from his coat and placed it gently on the table between them. sure if it was approval or just the truth. They sat that way for a long while, the fire low, the shadows tall. Then, without looking up from his carving, the Bellmaker spoke again. "I made my first bell for my sister," he said. "She was afraid of storms." The boy turned toward him, surprised. "So I hung it in the rafters, so she'd hear it ring before the wind arrived." He paused, ran a thumb down the side of the carving. "She said it made the wind sound kind." The boy looked at his own small bell, remembering the sound it had made in the woods, how it didn't fight the air, just met it, welcomed it. They said nothing more that night, but something between them had shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. Winter came slowly, with frost at first light and silence deeper than the snow. The trees held their breath. The mountain wore its stillness like a thick wool coat. Inside the workshop, everything softened. The boy no longer asked questions. He moved with care, not because he was told to, but because it felt right to do so. He learned to stir the forge before dawn, to press metal into form without force, and to wait longer than he thought he could. The Bellmaker worked beside him, never instructing, never correcting, just there. And in that quiet, the boy began to notice things he once would have missed. The difference between wind from the west and the hush that came from the north. was balanced, not bent. Some days they worked, some days they walked, and on the days when the sky was too low to see through, they sat by the fire and simply watched the wood crackle. No progress, no praise, no end in sight. But the boy felt something shift inside him, like snow melting beneath the surface. He no longer needed to know where the road would lead. It was enough to take the next quiet step. It was near the end of winter when the Bellmaker grew still. He rose later, spoke less, moved as though his bones remembered something his voice did not need to say. The boy, no longer really a boy now, watched quietly. He took over the tasks without being asked. He swept, he forged, he carried water before the sun had crested the ridge. And each night he listened for the chimes. They did not ring often, but when they did, they sounded clear and content. Then one morning, the Bellmaker stood beside him at the bench. In his hands, he held a bell, unfinished. He placed it gently before the boy and spoke for the first time in many days. This one's yours to finish. The boy looked at it. It was simple, smooth, barely shaped, but it carried weight, not in its metal, but in its stillness. He didn't ask what it was for, didn't ask who it was meant to serve. He only nodded and began. The file felt familiar now, the rhythm of his hands steady, and though the work was quiet, each movement held memory. just of the Bellmaker, but of mist and wind and waiting. He set the bell down at last. He did not test it. He simply closed his eyes and listened. The seasons turned again. The snow melted slowly, without urgency, and the path that had once brought the boy to the mountains began to open once more. He had shaped many bells by then, some large, some so small they barely whispered. But one he kept tucked in a fold of cloth and placed carefully in his satchel as he stood at the edge of the clearing. The Bellmaker, older now, but not diminished, stood beside him. They did not speak of goodbyes. There was no farewell, only a hand placed gently on his shoulder, a nod that held everything. And then the apprentice turned to go. He walked slowly down the path, through the trees, into the clouds that rose to meet him. He passed the old places, the crooked fence post, the stone shaped like a sleeping fox, and at the edge of the world, just before the trail vanished into mist, he paused. He reached into his coat, unwrapped the cloth, and tied the bell to a low, wind-weathered branch. Then he stepped back and waited. The air held its breath, and then the bell rang, a single note, low and whole, a sound that said, "I was here," and I listened. He didn't need to hear it again. He turned toward the valley and walked on. Some say that high in the mountains, where the clouds rest like wool against the trees, you can still hear it. The soft ringing of a bell no longer touched. A sound not meant to summon, but to remind that stillness is not the absence of life, but the fullness of it. That waiting can be its own kind of wisdom. That even the smallest sound, when shaped with care, can echo forever in the quiet parts of the soul. The boy who came seeking purpose left with something quieter. He learned to listen, to pause, to shape, not with force, but with trust. And in that stillness, he found the sound of home. So now, as your breath slows and your body softens into the dark, let that sound ring through you. Not loudly, not sharply, just enough. Let it be a bell that only you can hear. A bell that says, you have arrived, you are enough, and the wind has always known your name. Sleep well, dear dreamer. We'll ring again when the time is right.